You. After being accused of intimidating a 10-year-old during a murder investigation, a district attorney will now face a federal judge. Scott Perrilloux, the district attorney for Perrilloux and Livingston Parishes, is accused of coercing a boy to fabricate testimony in a capital murder case. That case was against Michael Wary, the man put on death row for the murder of a 16-year-old pizza delivery boy. Perrilloux tried to claim immunity to get the suit dismissed, but a judge ruled that his, quote, alleged use of intimidation and coercion to fabricate testimony went beyond the scope of his duties. Last year, we interviewed MacArthur Justice Foundation attorney Jim Craig, who filed the lawsuit on Wary's behalf.
We don't make these kinds of allegations lightly. We are directly challenging the integrity and the truthfulness of a sitting multi-term district attorney.
Wary had been scheduled for a retrial after his conviction was reversed by the U.S. Supreme Court, but Perrilloux allowed him to plead to manslaughter in a plea bargain back in December. Just 4 days after state police shot a man who was driving the wrong way on Bourbon Street, his attorney says there had to be a better way to stop him. Eric Cullender was arrested Saturday night after he was released from the hospital. He told his attorney that he didn't see troopers trying to stop him. Cullender was seen in this video driving the wrong way on Bourbon Street and two troopers running alongside his car. A trooper fired one shot into the car, hitting Cullender in the stomach.
Don't believe that it's first shoot and then come up with something else. So I'm just, I'm a little bit, concerned that was, and I understand where people are like, well, who knows what could have happened? He could have run into people, and and again, I'm not a police officer, I'm just a lawyer.
The attorney added that his client admitted to him that he was in the wrong. Cullender faces one count of resisting an officer and other charges.